on there, but I think unmute would probably be the best way to go. So today we're going to talk about Raptors and the Raptor Rehab of Arkansas. We're going to take a look at just general information on raptors and their taxonomy, characteristics, what makes a raptor a raptor. Also look at how to identify certain raptors. And we're going to take a look at raptors you may encounter in Arkansas. And we are going to include some rare ones. We do have some rare ones in Arkansas right now. And then we're going to take a look at and talk about the Raptor Rehab of Central Arkansas, which is where I volunteer most of my time. First, I'd like to discuss ornithologist, which is a noun and a person who studies or is an expert on birds. This man is not an ornithologist. Basically, you know, my information on raptors comes from working with them at the Raptor Center. I've been volunteering there for about 3.5 years. So my knowledge comes from working with the birds, being around bird people, bird nerds, and some reading. Here's some other non-ornithologists. Tommy Mebane, just before a major disaster, and Bob Ramoon at our last Christmas party. I'm sorry about that interjection. It's Bob and Tommy were maybe a bet that I couldn't get them into my presentation, and you lose. You guys each owe me $20. So why are raptors so important? They give us a lot of valuable environmental services. First of all, they control populations of pest species, a lot of rodents and snakes. Barn owls, for example, if you were a farmer and had a barn, you would really like a barn owl. They can eat about 12 mice a night, and 2 adults raising a nest of 3 birds can go eat about 1,500 rodents in the period of a nestling period. So they're voracious eaters, and good to have if you ever run into one. Vultures remove carrion from the environment. I don't know if y'all can imagine what this place would look like or smell like if we didn't have vultures around cleaning up the mess along the roads and other places along the woods. So anyway, it'd be kind of a smelly, messy place. Going along that lines, I also want to interject that raptors, almost all raptors, are opportunistic feeders. So not only vultures that feed mostly on carrion, but other raptors, eagles, and hawks will also eat carrion if they get hungry enough. And in fact, some vultures, if they get hungry enough, can't find carrion, they've been known to attack live prey, specifically the black-headed vulture, which is what we see there at the bottom of the screen. Some farmers don't care for them because they say they attack their calves. Calf is a little big for a black-headed vulture to go after, but they can get very aggressive. So all that being top of the food chain, they're a key indicator of environmental contamination. So if the environment is contaminated and it affects the rodents and reptiles that the birds feed on, or fish for the eagles that matter, it's an indicator that the environment is not doing so well. Having said that, if you think about how many raptors we see in Arkansas, and we do have a lot of raptors. I know y'all see them all the time driving down the highways and the interstates, and you're seeing hawks on the lines and kites flying and soaring. So what is a raptor? Raptor, the word comes from the word rapio, meaning to seize or take by force. as a general rule, and this is a very general rule, they're birds with keen eyesight. That's how they hunt. They have strong feet with talons so that they can catch and kill, and then grasp so they can tear it apart. And they have curved beaks for tearing apart and getting into look at the flesh. But if we look at the features a little closer, keen eyesight. So most of them are considered to have keen eyesight, but not all raptors necessarily do. So for your cathartiforms, which are your vultures, which are like your peregrine falcon, for example, the visual acuity is below that of a human. But remember that that word visual acuity encompasses perception of color and perception of depth. So, you know, to say that a peregrine falcon has less visual acuity than a human is also taking into account that, you know, while a peregrine falcon can soar 200 feet up in the air and see a small bird flying, up close, they don't necessarily see that well. Their vision is more binocular. A vulture does not depend on its eyesight to hunt or find its food. A vulture does it by sense of smell. Feet and talons. Strong and sharp is considered ambiguous with regard to classification for raptors, but take, for example, the vulture. And vultures have talons, but their feet are not that strong, and they don't really count on their talons to capture and hold prey as, let's say, they fly away. They a lot of times at the Raptor Center, if we're working with vultures, oftentimes we don't even wear a glove because their talons aren't that sharp and they don't grip that strong. Curved or hooked beaks. We've all seen the hooked beaks of the eagle and the hawks that they use for tearing apart their prey. But many species of birds have curved or hooked beaks, parrots, for example, but they're not considered to be raptors. Allows them to hunt smaller prey. Their talons will be thicker and sharper than most birds. They also have larger wings so that they can soar, and they're more powerful flyers. They generally have a meat diet. Most are carnivorous and will only eat meat. Some eat fish, which I guess is considered meat. They tend to have solitary behavior. So you'll see hawks soaring above. You usually don't see a flock of hawks or a flock of eagles, if you will. And they tend to have, they're not very vocal. So they have a quiet voice. They do that. That's a hunting advantage. You don't really care to announce yourself. And so that gives them a hunting advantage. But however, there's always exceptions. So at the top left, if you can see, that's a Harris hawk that we have at the center. These birds are indigenous to the southwest of the United States, and they are group hunters. So they will actually, for advantage for seeing distance, one will perch on a cactus, and other birds will stack on top of that bird. So one laying on top of its back, another one laying on top of that one's back, another one. They can stack up to 6 birds high. And they do that so they gain height, so they can see farther in the flat land of the Southwest deserts. And the top bird, when it sights prey, it'll take off after it, and the other birds follow. So, very velociraptor-like, if you will. As far as size, the picture in the middle top and the picture on the right are very small raptors. So the middle top, we have a eastern red-faced screech owl. They're very small birds. That bird is not quite a full adult, but is close. And then on the top right, one of our volunteers, Gary, is holding the American kestrel. And that bird really is not much bigger than a good-sized robin. So, so size is not necessarily an indicator. And then as far as being carnivorous and eating only meat, on the bottom left, that's a Mississippi kite. And again, being an opportunistic feeder, it will eat meat, but actually the Mississippi kite prefers bugs. And the Raptor features that I don't have on the slides, they're not really considered determining factors of raptors, but they're very, very common characteristic is in most species of raptors, the female is larger than the male, mostly for protection of the nest. The male also needs the speed, a little smaller, needs the speed for hunting and feeding the young, while the female is tending to the fledglings and the nestlings. And for most raptors, morphism between the sexes is absent. So it's very difficult to tell. The top left picture of the Harris's hawk, you could not tell looking at it. There are some exceptions to that. Barn owls, the male tends to have a little more color than the female, like songbirds. And the American kestrel that you see at the top right that Gary is holding, you can see the difference between males and females by coloration. So the bird that Gary is holding there is a male, and you can tell that because the wings have gray on the outer edges. The female would be one consistent color of the brown that you see on the back of the bird. So the taxonomy of raptors by order and how they fit into the bird world, broken into two categories of the australades and the aphrolades. King Philip came over for good salmon, I believe it is. So you can see how that breaks down into these orders down at the on the far right. The third one down, the falconiforms. The fifth one down, the cathartiforms, and the stringiforms that you see. The fourth and the fifth and sixth ones you see down there, the acidiforms and the stringiforms are the ones we're most familiar with. So those encompass your kites, your kestrels, your peregrine falcons. The cathartiforms are your vultures, your New World vultures, that is. Your acidiforms are your owls. Wait a minute. Why is that vulture doing in there, and why do we consider a vulture a raptor? They don't kill their prey. They mostly feed on carrion. They don't necessarily have keen eyesight, but they find their food by sense of smell. By the way, the turkey vulture, as we know it, has a much keener sense of smell than the black-headed vulture. So oftentimes you'll see the black-headed vulture hanging around with the turkey vultures. They let the turkey vultures find the food, and then they move in. They tend to get along as co-species, but the turkey vulture is a little bit better at sniffing things out. Talons they do have talons, but they're not that strong. They do have curved beaks, and actually they're more closely related to storks. So what we run into here is the bottom line is there is some ambiguity is to the classification of raptors. It's not always particularly that clear and concise on the taxonomy as to what is a raptor and what isn't. So here we have several orders that are spread out, and with the different characteristics and what qualifies on the far right. The top 7 there are considered raptors, and the bottom 4 are not. So your shrikes, your ravens, your cormorants, and warblers are not. But your hawks, eagles, falcons, the caracaras, owls, newer vultures are. And if you look on the row for the New World vultures for the cathartiforms, you'll see that they have keen eyes, they do have the hook beak, and they are diurnal hunters, which is a characteristic of most raptors. They meet 3 of the 5 anyway, so they get classified as raptors. Interesting enough, if you look at the 4th row, the owls, the stringiforms, diurnal is blank. So, they're classifying the owls as being night hunters. That's true to some extent. Not all owls are truly night hunters, but we'll be talking a little bit more about that here in a bit. So skipping all the taxonomy and all that stuff that we're going to leave to those ornithologists, we're going to look at the classifications of the raptors as we know them. So you have your accipiters, buteos, eagles, falcons, harriers, hawks, kites, osprey, owls, and vultures. Your accipiters encompass most of your hawks. So they are your most common ones. That's what you see, your Cooper's hawk and sharp-shinned hawk. Your falcons, your peregrine falcons, kestrels are very common here in Arkansas, and your buteos are your red tails, your soaring hawks, if you will. And even under red tail hawk, there is quite a few of subspecies. The accipiters are our largest raptor order with 75 genera and 262 species. Even under the classification of red tail, there are many subspecies. So and then we have 2 subspecies. It's quite diverse in the accipiter form. Almost all of them are carnivorous and hunt by sight, either day or twilight. They tend to be long-lived. We had a Harris hawk at the Raptor Center that passed 2 years ago, and she was 27 years old. And we have another Harris's hawk at the Raptor Center right now, and she is 25 years old. So that can go quite a ways. I think even eagles can go 40 years. They tend to have a low reproduction rate. Most accipiters have a nest of 2 eggs or 2 nestlings, if you will, as opposed to a lot of your typical songbirds that have 4 or sometimes even more. And even among that 2 that they have, there is a low survival rate. The eggs are predated quite a bit, and the nestlings are susceptible to predation by other birds and other raptors. The fledglings tend to grow very quickly, and I'll show you some pictures later on how fast they do grow. They're voracious eaters, and within a couple of weeks, they're leaving the nest. They're flighted, and then even after they're flighted, they stay about 3 to 8 weeks hanging around the nest and staying around the nest. Most accipiters take about 3 years to sexually mature, so there's a lot of juveniles flying around. And for the most part, monogamy is a general rule. So they will pair up and stay together as long as they can. On the death of one partner, however, they will accept another partner. This I ran across this interesting map. This is a diversity of accipiters globally. So this isn't accipiter density. This is species density. So in areas around the equator and below, you're seeing where you have species of 50 or more different species in that area versus, if you look at North America, it's a little bit lighter green. So we're looking somewhere around 16 to 24 different species of accipiters in that area. And don't really have an explanation for this. The not being an ornithologist, but I am going to theorize that probably has a lot to do with food supply. So you see in your southern sub-Sahara areas of Africa and in the rainforest of South America, you can imagine there's quite a bit of food supply for them there. And also, once you get outside of those temperate mid-latitude zones, you're probably looking at specialization, which narrows down where certain species can go. So, even if you look at North America, you can see the diversity density decreases as you go farther north. Well, you're getting into much colder climates. So a red-tailed hawk that may live anywhere from Minnesota down to Venezuela, you're not going to find that same red tail up in Nunavut, Canada. It just is not suitable for that environment. Identifying raptors is quite tricky only because a lot of them tend to look the same. And so even here in Arkansas, a lot of people will see a raptor and I think it was a red tail. I think it was a broad wing. I think it was a red shoulder. And we'll go into that a little bit more when we go into the birds of Arkansas, but a lot of them do look the same. But things you can look for in identifying raptors kind of goes back to the same basics that we learned for all bird identification. Look at the size and shape, color and pattern, look at their behavior, look at the habitat. Where are you finding these things? And that's a key indicator as to what the bird may be. Interestingly enough, some of the four basics for bird identification doesn't mention vocalization, but while raptors aren't songbirds, and size, compare the bird size to surrounding objects. How big or small is it? Does it look bigger than a robin, smaller than a robin, bigger than a chicken, smaller than a chicken? Look at the plumage. What's the overall color? Barring, striping, and spotting on raptors is critical for identification. Some of them that look very similar can only be told apart by barring or general color or spotting. Behavior. Think of the raptors that you see driving down the road. What are they doing? They're standing on a branch. They're high up. They're standing on a power line high up. They're looking for rodents moving around. Looking for prey. A lot of raptors you'll see soaring and looking for prey. Behavior. Take a look at the legs and feet. How large are they? And specifically, how thick are legs? And that can be a key indicator as to what raptor you're looking at. Also, are the legs bare or are they covered with feathers? That's pretty critical to identifying the difference between a bald eagle and a golden eagle, actually. If they're flying, you want to take a look at the wing shape and the wing pattern. Are they tapered wings? Are the exterior feathers, the primary feathers, are they extended out and separated? Are the wing pattern, does it have any barring or striping? Is it dark color, light on top, light on bottom? Does it have any striping? At the wrist area, is there any particular pattern? How is the bird flying? kind of a long extended flap because their wings are big and the bird is big. Their flapping is not quite as quick as what you may see, especially something like the kestrel or a kite even, when they're moving pretty quick. Take a look at the body pattern. Again, you want to look at if there's any color and if there's any streaking or spotting or speckling, if you will. And then the tail, short tail, long tail. Is it held out fanned when they're in flight, or do they keep it close together? That's pretty critical to determining the difference if it's a buteo or if it is a falcon, an accipiter. So as they're flying, you can break down a lot of your raptors into 3 different classifications: falcons, accipiters, or buteos. Your falcons tend to be a little bit smaller. They have a tapered wing. It's a swept wing. They're built for speed. They're smaller birds, and they are built for speed. They tend to smash into their target. The peregrine falcon, for example, will circle and soar at a height, and its favorite prey is a small songbird. And when it sees that bird, it will tuck its wings. It will close its nostrils, that it uses a special bone to do that. It has a secondary eyelid that will protect its eyelids, and it will fold its wings and dive straight down, and they can reach speeds up to 200 miles an hour. Peregrine falcons are the fastest animal. They literally smash into their prey, try to render it unconscious or unflyable, knock it to the ground. They immediately follow it down, grasp it with its talons, and they have a specialized hook in their beak that they can attack the neck bone of their prey, and they basically snap the neck. Your accipiters are some of your smaller hawks, like your sharp-shinned and I'm drawing a blank right at the moment. Your Cooper's hawk, thank you. And they tend to be a little bit smaller birds. They will work in closer environments with more closer obstruction. So you'll see them working in timber and wood. Tail feathers tend to be held closer together. Your buteos are considered your soaring hawks. Those are your red tails and your broad wing hawks that you see circling over fields and then coming in for a dive to catch whatever it is they're looking for. On the right, you can see some of the profiles with some of the coloring filled in. And, as far as we were discussing the difference in the barring and the coloring, if you look at number 10, which is your red-shouldered hawk, and you look at number 17, which is your progress. Those two are. You can see how similar those two are. Basically, the only determining factor is that your red shoulder has a little more color toward the front of it. It's a little bit larger in size, and the barring is a little bit stronger on the tail. Also, if you look at number 12, which is your black vulture, and number 19, which is turkey vulture, we see these flying circles over our head all the time. In Arkansas, usually they found something, or they're smelling something, or they're drafting the wind looking for something dead, and you can't see their head. If you could, you would pick the turkey vulture out very easily because they have a red head. The black-headed vulture, black, but at the distance that we usually see them, oftentimes you can't see that. But what you do see is the underside of their wings. So if you'll note, Number 12, the black vulture, the white on the wingtips only extend partially down the wing, whereas the turkey vulture, number 19, that the white extends all the way to the body of the bird. And so that is pretty easy to see when they're circling overhead. All birds are protected. All raptors are protected. We have a couple of laws protecting these things. The first one went into effect in 1918. People were catching a lot of birds. Women's hats that sported feathers were very popular in the early 1900s. So they were catching all these birds for the feathers, for the hats, and overhunting and poaching started to deplete our numbers of all kinds of birds, songbirds and raptors. So the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 included all North American birds, not just raptors. Was that a question? Okay. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act does get amended on occasion, and also gets changed by administrative regulation. And I think at the current time, it's protecting 52 different species of birds. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act also prohibited the removal of any of the listed species or their parts, including feathers, eggs, and nests, from any property, and that includes a private property owner. You know, they've got a tree stand somewhere out there, and they get ready for deer season, and they go out there, and there's a vulture that's made a nest in their stand. And actually, a lot of them will remove that themselves, which is illegal. Sometimes we get calls from them, and you know, what do we do? And of course, we have to tell them that you really can't do anything, and they have to find another stand. But anyway, so the Bird Act, the Migratory Bird Act, there was an update to the administrative law in January 2021. I won't tell you whose administration that was under, but the administrative ruling said that it would no longer enforce penalties under the Bird Act for the accidental killing of birds by businesses or individuals. So if a manufacturing facility was to move into an area and their manufacturing discharge, quote, accidentally hurt the indigenous raptor population, as long as they could prove that it was accidental, that there was no intent involved, then they would be exempt from the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Didn't quite sound right. So recent administrations have reversed that ruling, and that took place in September of 2021. Another law that protects the raptors is the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, 1940. This was to ensure further protection for our eagles. Coincidentally, 1940, wartime years, eagles being the national bird, and so, you know, patriotism at work. Again, provides criminal penalties for any persons who take, possess, sell, purchase, or do anything with any part of a bald or golden eagle, live or dead, a nest, or any egg thereof. And it further defines what take is. So take actually includes pursue, shoot at, poison, molest, or disturb. So basically, leave the eagles alone. If you see them, leave them alone. Some of the older members of the chapter may remember a NIC class we had with a rehabber, and she talked about eagles, and basically said that, you know, if you see an eagle and you think it's injured, the best thing you can possibly do is call somebody else. Call game rehab or call rehab center. because one, there's a good chance that eagle can hurt you. It's a panicked animal. It's hurt and it's in distress. They're very powerful birds. But equally as importantly, anything you do to that eagle is illegal unless you're licensed to do it. And so as soon as you go to even pursue it, you're violating federal law. Third act that protects raptors is the Endangered Species Act. This was passed in 1973, and this provides additional protection for any animal listed as threatened or endangered. And we have a couple raptors that are specifically listed within this act, and that includes the bald eagle, spotted owl, California condor, and peregrine, and the Everglade kite. Raptors we might see in Arkansas. And so on the left there, you're looking at Haugus razorbacchus, commonly known as a flying pig. It was considered extinct as of recent in the Southeastern Conference, but we've recently had some sightings, and we believe that they're starting to make a comeback in our area. Pretty exciting stuff. You're going to see a lot of eagles in Arkansas. We have eagles that are resident. We have a tremendous amount of eagles, especially this time of year, that are migratory. A lot of their land and lakes up north are frozen, and they come down here. That's not to say that some of them don't stay up there. 2 years ago, I went up to Minnesota on a nice fishing trip, and I saw a few eagles, and they were feeding mostly on carrion or whatever trash, unfortunately, but there were a few up there. So, but many of them migrate. They come down to Arkansas. Most of what you'll see are golden eagles, and they can be seen around a lot of our lakes: DeGray, Washita, Greer's Ferry, Beaver, and along a lot of the rivers, especially the trout rivers. So fishermen along the White Rivers, the Little Red, and the North Fork see a lot of eagles this time of year. Also, the Kings River, that south of Berryville, is a major wintering place for eagles. And if you ever get a notion, sometime around this time of year, when maybe perhaps a little more temperate, if you could do a float on the Kings River, you will see masses there will be a few golden mixed. Golden Arkansas, but there are a few that do. And a lot of people see an eagle and they think it's a golden, but not necessarily so. They're often confused with juvenile balds who really don't get their white tail feathers and their white heads until they reach about 2 years of maturity. The golden eagle tends to be a little bit larger, and the feathers, as we discussed earlier, the feathers on the golden eagle extend all the way down to the feet and the talons. Their beaks tend to be a little bit larger and are darker color. Mature golden eagles actually will have almost a full black beak, whereas the mature golden eagle has the yellow looking beak. Owls. We have lots and lots of owls in Arkansas, and they're so fun to listen to in the evening. Basically, we have 4 types of owls in Arkansas. We have the barred owl, and the barred owl, barred owl is known as has the call, the who cooks for you call. Don't get me started on making bird calls that I think heifers have a better chance of imitating the bird than I do, but that's their most noted vocalization. The great horned owl is but not, they don't give the uptick on the who cooks for you like the barred owl does. Between the two of them, it's my understanding that the barred owl is the larger of those two species and the largest owl we have here in Arkansas. My experience, though, from the barred owls that we have at the Raptor Center, the great horned look a little bit larger, but maybe that's just me. I know that both of these birds, when they want to send a warning, they will bow up, they will fluff their feathers, they'll spread their wings, and both of them get to be about the size of a turkey. It can be actually quite intimidating when they do. Birds. I have a slide. I will have to add one, but I don't have a slide of showing the difference between the talons. But let me just tell you, the great horned owl's talons are just flat gnarly. They're thick. The talons are extremely sharp. You can just look at them and tell them that they're powerful. Even our educated and glove trained owls that we have at the Raptor Center, when we get them up on our gloves, their grip, I've been bruised. I've been bruised through the glove by the grip of a great horned owl. They're that strong. And they are the bad boys of the woods. So there is nothing that will come after a great horned. So in fact, if there are eagles in an area and a great horned moves in, even if the eagles are nesting, they will move. Even the eagles don't mess with the great horned owl. At the Raptor Center, when we're rehabbing these birds, oftentimes we'll put a great horned, go from a smaller flight area to a larger flight area so that it can develop its wings prior to release. And when we do that, we can only put it in that area with other great horned owls. If there's any other bird in that pen with that great horned, the great horned will kill it and eat it. So they are pretty much bad to the bone. Their favorite food actually is a skunk. And so oftentimes when we'll have a great horn come in, they don't necessarily smell all that good. It doesn't affect them apparently, but it does. It affects us when they come in. So they can get pretty smelly when they come in. The two other owls that we have in Arkansas are the barn owl. We spoke about them earlier and what voracious eaters they are. Note the plumage on this owl. They're beautiful birds, light colored breast with the speckling, and then the almost mottled color with the lighter colored head, flat face. This is a male barn owl. A female barn owl will not have quite the color variation in its plumage that this male does. The barn owl has a little bit of a flatter face, and you'll notice the face. They have ears that are offset. This bird is a silent flyer, by the way. So they have actually tried to record the sound of this bird in flight. And it has a ability to interlock its feathers that as the air passes over them, there is no sound at all, not even the air going over the wings. They're totally silent. They like buildings, thus the name barn owl. And they love to catch the rodents inside those things. So they hunt in complete darkness. They hunt in complete silence. They have two ears that are offset in their head. One is higher up than the other and further forward than the other. And that variance in their hearing allows them to better locate food and movement in total darkness. The feathers to sound vibration. So these birds are, basically living sonar machines, and very good to have around. We also have screech owls in Arkansas, and there's one sitting in a pine tree on the right. We have two kinds of screech owls. We have the eastern red-faced screech owl and the eastern gray-faced screech owl. This is basically the same bird, just a different color morph. And these birds are diurnal hunters. I want to point out something right quick. If you look at the eyes on the barn owl on the left, and you can see they're completely black. And look at the eyes at the screech owl on the right, and you actually see an iris and a pupil. And if we go back a slide, look at the eyes at the barred owl, which are completely black, and look at the eyes of the great horn, which are beautiful golden with the pupil in the middle. What this means is this distinguishes the difference between a diurnal and a nocturnal hunter. So diurnal being light or twilight, and the nocturnal meaning night hunters. So your barred and your barn are nocturnal hunters, and their eyes are built for that. Your screech and your great horned are diurnal hunters. So they're hunting mostly early morning, late evening, sometime into the night, but they don't have the advantage of total darkness like the barred or the barn do. The right color underneath, sometimes they'll have a dark head, and they might have a belly band, but most of the red tails you will see in Arkansas are light underneath, dark above, with the distinguishing red tail, as opposed to top right, which is red-shouldered hawk, another very common bird in Arkansas, light colored underneath and being red, is lightly barred. Between the two, it would be hard to distinguish without knowing those two differences. Also, look to bottom right at the red-shouldered hawk. This is sitting. So as we look at it, we don't see the distinguishing red tail at the bottom. We also don't see a light colored breast. We see more of a spotted or speckled breast with a dark shouldered wing. So identifying features while they're flying, identified features while they're in flight. More hawks in Arkansas, Coopers and sharp-shinned hawks. These are your accipiters. The birds we looked at on that last slide are your buteos, or your soaring hawks. These are your accipiters. They tend to be smaller birds, shorter wings. They tend to work in timbered areas or areas where there are more obstructions. They catch smaller prey, and very fast flyers. The Cooper's hawk has been sometimes called the Darth Vader of the forest. When it's around, everything else disappears. They like thick brush. They can move very well in it, and they're pretty much voracious eaters. Your sharp-shinned hawk is a smaller bird and not quite as common in Arkansas, but looking between those two, you can see if you had to identify two sitting on a fence or flying, how difficult that would be. There's a little bit of difference in the beak, and there's a little bit difference in the edge of the tail feathers. But other than that, these birds are very identical. The sharp-shinned just tend though. Yeah, very cool birds. More hawks that you'll find in Arkansas. We have the broad-winged hawk. And we have Swainson hawks in Arkansas, but it's relatively uncommon. These birds are more indigenous to the Midwest, northwest of us, around Kansas and some in Oklahoma and Iowa. But we do find them in Arkansas occasionally. The broad-winged hawk in flight, if you look at the underside of that bird, and you will see the barring on the tail and as well as the wings. Now, if we go back to the red-shouldered hawk in flight, the tail. The slighter difference between the two is that the red-shouldered hawk, the barring, there is more barring and it's a little bit lighter. Whereas with the broad-winged hawk, has very distinct 2 or 3 bars on its tail, and it also has the darker along the leading edges, or the trailing edges, if you will, of the wing. But other than that, they would be very hard to tell apart. Broad-winged hawk would also be a little bit larger than the red-shouldered hawk. Ospreys. We have a few resident ospreys in Arkansas, but a lot of them are also migratory. I have seen more of these birds around Cypress Creek Reservoir, north of Plummerville, and there tend to be look at the talons on that bird. Very good at grasping slippery things like trout and other fish. The distinguishing characteristics on an osprey, you can almost always tell them by the white streak that is above their eye. I forgot the technical term for that, but it's pretty easy to see whether the bird is perched or whether the bird is in flight. You're also going to see these birds around water because that's their food source. They tend to be fairly large. They're going to be the size of a red-tailed hawk, sometimes a little bit bigger, not as big as an eagle, but probably about the size of a hawk or bigger. They have a pretty large wingspan. They are totally light colored underneath, dark colored on top. They have a very unique vocalization. It's somewhere between a hawk and an eagle. It somewhat chatters, and it's high pitched. Falcons. Probably our most common falcon in Arkansas is a peregrine. And I know a lot of people think these things are extinct. At one point in time, they were on the list for being endangered and extinct, but I'm here to tell you that they have a pretty healthy population, and you probably see these birds more than you think. You probably look at it and overlook it, not realizing that you're looking at a peregrine. They're medium-sized birds. They're larger than a robin, but they're smaller than a hawk. So they're probably about they tend, when they hunt, to be at very high altitudes, so they're sometimes hard to spot. And like we discussed earlier, they tuck their wings and come down at very fast speeds to knock their prey down. This picture on the left, you can see he's caught a bird and has probably already snapped the neck and is working on eating on it. The nostril, you can't quite see it in this picture, but the nostril actually has a bone in it. It's like a flap, like an aileron on a plane or something, but they can close their nostrils when they dive to soar, and that's to keep 200-mile-an-hour winds from coming up through their nostrils and blowing their brains out the back of their head, I guess. But quite adapted for this ability to hunt. The American kestrel, part of the falcon family. small bird, probably about the size of a parrot. And no, not quite the size of a parrot, probably about the size of a parakeet, actually, maybe a little bit bigger. You see these birds much, much more than you realize. You probably pass them going down the road all the time. They're sitting on a telephone wire over a field, and you look at it and you think, oh, that's a robin, or it's a big sparrow or something like that. We have many of them in Arkansas. These birds, unique behavior of them is they will hover in flight. So as they stir up bugs, and that is their favorite food, is bugs, they will fly over field and hover as they see a prey down on the end of the grass, and then dive down to catch it. So distinguishing marks are the rusty back. Females also have rusty wings, whereas the males have the gray wings. They have a speckled breast. Another distinguishing mark is the two lines that come down from their eyes around a white band that goes kind of around their head. They call those whiskers on each side of the face. So pretty easy to tell if you can get them to hold still and look at them that long. Kites, specifically Mississippi kites. These are very interesting birds. I think just about everybody's seen these. They are definitely migratory. We do not have resident kites in Arkansas. They leave in the fall. They migrate as far south as South America. And they come back up here in the summertime to nest and date on smaller birds and squirrels even, but their very favorite food is dragonflies. So over fields that have recently been cut or disturbed, that's bringing up the dragonflies, or areas where dragonflies are feeding in mass on a hatch, or mosquitoes or something like that, you will see the kites soaring overhead and diving down to catch them. So they don't hunt in packs, but you will see them in flocks at times, especially during the nesting season. They tend to cooperate with their young, and they're very vocal. So oftentimes I will hear kites before I even see them. When they get, they're soaring or circling overhead, they get super excited and they start vocalizing and communicating with each other. And then you start looking around and you'll see them circling around. So pretty interesting thing. Called a Mississippi kite because when they migrate up from South America, they tend to migrate up into the areas surrounding the Mississippi River. So that's how they got their name. On the left, you can see different color morphs of the kites. So you've got a perched juvenile that hasn't quite reached his adult plumage, where he turns a little bit lighter. He's still got a lot of brown speckling and striping on his breast. And that's a common feature. All these identifying features that we talk about in these birds, you have to keep in mind that will look totally different from adults. So even a juvenile red tail can very easily be mistaken as an adult red-shouldered hawk that just hasn't color morphed yet into what we know as a red-tailed hawk would look like. Harriers. We don't get a lot of harriers in Arkansas, but we do have some. Great place for seeing these birds is the Hollow Bend area. They like open fields and open marshes. This is a raptor that it's a soaring bird, but not soaring in the way that we think of it. These things will fly 3 to 5 feet over a field, very low flying. And actually what they're trying to do is disturb prey. And so they locate it and then they come back and catch it. So it is considered boteo. It is a soaring bird. They tend to have a little flatter face than some of your other hawks. A very distinguishing characteristic of harriers, if you look at the top right picture, is that white spot between at the top of the tail, between the body and the tail. That's pretty consistent with northern harrier, or what they call marsh hawks. They're medium to large sized birds. They're actually a little bit bigger than a red-tailed hawk, and usually dark on top and light underneath, with, again, a little bit flatter face. Their beak does not protrude out like some of the other hawks that we're familiar with. If you see one in flight from underneath, that's the bottom right picture. And again, unless you were really good at identifying these things, you would say that's probably a red-shouldered hawk. It's got the color pattern and everything. It's got the barring on the tail, maybe a broad-winged hawk. The only difference, distinguishing features, is the primary feathers are elongated and spread, and the barring on the tail is not quite as pronounced as a broad-shouldered hawk, but is definitely more pronounced than a red-shouldered hawk. Again, a good place to see those is Hollow Bend. And this time of year, there's several of them down there. Vultures. So we have basically two types of vultures, not buzzards. Buzzards live in Africa. We have vultures. And we have two types of vultures in Arkansas. We have the turkey vulture and the black vulture. The turkey vulture tends to be bigger, a little bit browner in color, and with a bare-skinned red head. The black vulture is a smaller bird, all black, and with a bare-skinned black head. The good birds to have around that keep the place clean. Voracious eaters, they will eat themselves to incapably to fly. They will, a lot of times you'll see them on the side of the road, and as you drive by, you'll see the vulture just kind of hops away, takes a few steps, and you think, oh, that, what a crazy bird. He's going to get run over, or he's not even afraid of a car. That's not necessarily what's going on. It's very possible that the bird has gorged himself and filled himself with so much food that he can't fly, even if he wanted to. However, if that bird chose to flee in the course of being threatened or endangered, the first thing it would do would be to regurgitate the contents of its stomach. Knowing that what vultures eat, and knowing that they're regurgitating it, you can only imagine what the smell is like. That alone should repel any predators, but that enables them to make a quick getaway if they have to. They can fly after that point. We've had that happen to us a couple times at the Raptor Center, and I can't even begin to tell you how disgusting vulture vomit is. Let's just say you do not want to get anywhere near it. If you get it on your clothes, burn them. You can't get it out. The top two pictures, we're taking a look at point out the difference in the color and the underside of the wings. So the black vulture, the white extends somewhat down the wings, but not very far. Actually, I've seen them go a little bit farther than that, and maybe an immature black vulture. And then the turkey vulture in flight, the white goes along the tail end of the wings all the way to the body of the bird. So, and that's pretty well something you can see from a distance and be able to tell between the two. Also, the turkey vulture tends to be a little bit larger. If it's a great distance and you can't see the coloring, I know that some people mistake turkey vulture soaring for maybe an immature golden eagle or an immature bald eagle. But if you look at the profile of the bird, also the way they carry their wings, from a front end view, an eagle's wings from the body, whereas vultures, looking from a head-on view, have their wings a little bit acutely uplifted. So it makes a slight V or a slight curve in their wing formation as they're soaring. And we get some rare species in Arkansas, very, very rarely. These are a pair of snowy owls that a male and female, a pair that somehow have found their way down to Arkansas. These two have been sighted outside of Jonesboro. They were picked up about a month ago, and they are on private land currently. Bird watchers are flocking to the area to catch glimpses of these things. They are deep. Make sure you got a really good scope or some high power binoculars. They can be seen, but the private landowner does not care to have anybody coming onto his property to see the birds for any particular reason. Snowy owls have been seen in Arkansas, as recorded, only 5 times. So this year being one of those 5. So it's causing quite a bit of excitement for them being down here. Not sure why they're down here, but they are. So occasionally we get rare birds in Arkansas, even I think earlier in this year, as a result of one of the hurricanes, we had one of the species of albatross sighted in Arkansas. It just got blown off course and blown up here, and had all the bird watchers pretty excited about that. Raptor Rehab Center of Central Arkansas. Then general picture of the yard. We've got the birds. On the left is Rodney Paul. He is the founder and the licensed operator for the Rehab Center. Been operating since 2003. We've got about 6,000 square feet of covered habitat. All of our habitat actually is covered, and quite a few birds under there. And we're a private rehab facility, so we're not open to public visitation or tours. If you can make an appointment with Rodney or ask some of the volunteers if you're interested in coming out there, but it has to be done by appointment only. Did you know that we are Raptor Rehab Central Arkansas? We're the largest Raptor Rehab facility in the state. We're only one of and we experience about a 50% release rate, which actually concurs with which is about the national average for rehab centers for raptors. And to date, we've released about 2,500 and counting birds back into the wild. So kind of a busy place. Totally privately funded through donations. We don't get grants, and we have no endowments, so we count on people's charitable nature to keep us going. Our main business is rehabilitation. So we receive approximately 500 birds that come into the center for rehab. And we get them in different states. Sometimes, I mean, like a typical rehab center, sometimes we get them from post-surgery, and sometimes we get them from trauma. More often the latter. So we do see a lot of trauma at the center. I'm not going to share any pictures of any of that stuff. Nobody wants the Debbie Downers today, but we see some pretty mean stuff there. We do give the birds triage, and then if needed, we give them some extended medical care. Our rehab birds are meant to be released into the wild, so we coordinate our efforts and modify our behavior toward these birds to distance ourselves from them so the birds do not imprint on humans. Some birds imprint better than others. Kites, for example, when they're chicks, they love us because they're voracious eaters and we're feeding, and every time they see us, they vocalize very loudly and they're willing to, approach us. But then they grow up, they learn to hate us, and if you stick your hand in the cage, they're more than likely going to tell on you. and bite you. Um, but other birds imprint a little bit better than others. Black-headed vultures imprint very easily, and we actually have a few of those at the rehab center that we have rehabbed that have since uh, imprinted, and they would probably not do well out if they were released because they just count on us too much and they're too used to humans. That would probably be very dangerous to them as they would approach humans. And you know, humans as a general, vultures don't have a good name around humans. The But the ones that have imprinted with us, you know, they're like dogs. They'll follow you around the yard. Um, they have vocalization commands. They're pretty trained. And so some of you that have been out there on tour have seen Frodo and Gandalf, our two black-headed birds. So anyway, this particular bird, this was a rehab bird. This is a very young red-tailed hawk that we got in. One thing I want to point out, being a young bird, and this again goes to the color morphing, this is a beautiful bird, one of the prettier red tails that I've seen, mostly because it's young, and it has a lot of color morphation in it. So you'll see the breast, it's got a lot of speckling, and whereas it gets older, that will basically lose those feathers and they'll replace with white feathers. Also, if please look at the eyes, if you will. You'll see they're almost greenish or light brownish. That's a very strong indicator in hawks of a young bird. As they age, their eyes tend to darken and dark brown by the time he's a full adult. The other thing to note is the band on his right leg. So when we got this bird, it had come into, probably hit something. It had a little bit of a head trauma. I don't know if it got hit by a car or it hit something, a building, a window, a tree, who knows. But it came to us with head trauma. It recovered from the head trauma fairly well. But Rodney researched the band, and as it turned out, this bird was banded a couple years prior to its show up here at the Raptor Center, and it was banded in northern Saskatchewan and had made its way all the way down to St. Louis, where it was captured because it was hanging around the St. Louis airport and was endangering planes and itself. And so yeah, and then it found its way down here to Arkansas, where unfortunately it met with some incident that put us in at the Raptor Center. So it's really surprising how far some of these birds will travel. Last November, we took in a blue goose, not necessarily a raptor, but we do take in other birds for rehab at times. And actually, it was banded as well. And when we researched that band, it turns out it was banded in August of 2005, which means it was at least a 25-year-old goose. And it had been banded when it was 2 years old and on Nico Island in Nunavut, Canada. So that thing was a long way from home. What a blue goose is doing in Arkansas, I am not sure, but he's probably on his way back by now, I guess. So the trauma that brings the birds to us can take many forms. We get birds that have congenital trauma, and usually when in cases like that, it's a bird that's born with a defect, and the adult in the survival of the fittest mode will push that nestling out of the nest to make room for the other more suitable of the hatch and be able to feed them better. And then somebody walks along and finds a baby bird on the ground, and here we go. We've got a fledgling barred, or in the case on the left, some great horned owls. Those are fledgling great horned owls. Lead poisoning. Right now, this time of year, we have a tremendous amount of eagles, migratory, mostly in nature, and they're feeding like crazy on fish and remains of deer hunters' carcasses not the deer hunter carcasses, but they're deer carcasses that they're leaving out in the woods. A lot of these have trace elements of lead. The fish sometimes will have trace elements of lead from sinkers or baits, and it takes very, very, very little lead in an eagle to make it at a toxic level. So like 3.03 parts per million or something like that. It's a very terrible toxicity issue with the bird. It's a horrible thing to see. It's very easily identified. The bird becomes despondent, listless, usually confused, inability to use. It affects the nerves, inability to use its muscles, coordinate. It tends to the body is a very identifiable green color. So that's an immediate sign that the bird has got lead poisoning. If we can catch the bird at the very early stages of the toxicity, we can give it injections of a chemical, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a chemical that will bond with the lead within the system and adhere to the lead, and then allow the bird system to dispose of it out the body, and thus go through a detoxification process. So we had one case of an eagle, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, had come in. It was lead poisoning under normal levels. 11 parts per million will kill an eagle, and 0.3 it starts to show signs of toxicity, but 11 is definitely fatal. Bird came in, we had the blood tested. This bird had 25 parts per million of lead poisoning in its system. We immediately started it on injections of this antitoxic combination solution, and amazingly, this bird came back. I mean, it was just one of the amazing cases we've had, and that bird was later released and is now flying around somewhere. But usually lead poisoning, the success rate on that is very low. It's just a terrible, terrible thing that happens with a lot of our eagles and some of the other raptors. Shootings, we don't see that too much, but we do see that occasionally some yahoo takes a shot at a raptor, mistake.
This is Sam. Have we lost the audio?
This is Robin. I can't hear it either.
I think we've lost the whole feed. I can
I
see
see the-
parts of it.
I see the pictures of the birds, but I don't hear, he's been breaking up on his audio.
Yeah, I
He
thought it was me.
has. I didn't stop it because that's usually a problem with your internet, which means he couldn't do anything about it. Let me see if I can.
Can you send him a chat message or something?
I'm just going to call. That's
Okay.
usually works the best.
Okay.
There we go. You should be able to hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I did. I lost my connection, and then when it came back on, it for some reason it put me on mute. So sorry about that.
Okay.
And
Just share your screen again, I guess.
working on that. Things are moving a little slow here. My apologies.
Well, you've been breaking up a little bit, but that's usually your internet connection. So I didn't stop you.
Yeah, it is. It is. Conway Corp is doing me right. I'm hitting share.
You need to pay your internet bill, Fliss.
Bob, I thought you were doing that for me. You owe me $20, by the way.
Oops, I couldn't